What's up friends, it's Endymion, and here I thought I could relax and play some video games, but it looks like there's been some insane controversies growing quickly that I have a thing or two to say about. And I know there are those in my viewership that think I'm overusing the term woke when it comes to my videos, but I truly think these things need to be exposed for what they are. If we simply lie down and allow things to pass, the all-consuming woke brain virus will transform what we love until everything is destroyed. So I believe it's my duty to expose these things, and I hope you understand where I'm coming from. Because as you listen, you'll come to understand just how far this virus has gone, and why it's up to us to push back because the insanity is only going to get worse. And don't worry, I'll get into the whole Cleopatra situation later on in the video. To start things off, as many are likely aware, Disney has cast the lead actress in Lilo and Stitch, which is yet another live-action remake that no one asked for. And for a company so hell-bent on representation and the diversity of its content, this latest project is already spelling doom for the House of Mouse again. Nani, who is Lilo's older sister in the film, is being played by actress Sydney Elizabeth Agudong, whose ethnicity is apparently Filipino and Hawaiian, yet even though Sydney checks the diversity box of being Hawaiian, fans online are accusing Disney of colorism because Nani is indigenous and has dark hair and skin, which Sydney does not. As you can expect, the SHIT storm that this has caused is making both sides of the political angle to rage out. But it also reveals some blatant racist and oftentimes selective forms of activism that makes me roll my eyes more than anything. So let's talk about this and why it's all very, very stupid. What I mean by selective activism is that oftentimes when something outrages a certain group, they only get mad when it goes against what they want. But if radical changes happen that benefit those groups, they are magically fine with it. A good example of this would be the Little Mermaid being black, which of course people will say she's a mermaid, so what does it matter? But we need to remember that Hollywood has been race-swapping characters to such a degree that it's starting to become borderline insane at times. A great example of selective activism is when Netflix decided to make a series about Anne Boleyn, who was the Queen of England for roughly 3 years between 1533 to 1536. She was a royal who enjoyed luscious parties and the fine things in life, and eventually during the riots, Anne was beheaded by a French swordsman as she prayed for salvation. But the one indisputable fact about Anne was that she was 100% a white English woman. But in the Netflix series, Anne Boleyn is played by Jodie Turner-Smith, who is clearly the exact opposite of who the Queen of England was. By all accounts, having Smith play Boleyn is about as colorist as it gets. It's quite literally the real-life version of that meme you've probably seen of Ryan Gosling being cast as the Black Panther. While absurd and completely the opposite of who Black Panther should be, that's what Netflix has done here. They took something that was tied to English history and changed it for woke points. And anyone defending Jodie Turner-Smith playing Anne Boleyn is either a hypocrite or a plain dumbass in my opinion. What we're seeing these days is what I call reverse colorism, as I acknowledge that Hollywood in its past was very evidently racist when it came to the depiction of other races in film. In 2016, we had films like Gods of Egypt, where Gerard Butler played the Egyptian god Set, even though, well, he's Gerard Butler, and that makes zero sense. Then there was, and I know I'll butcher his name, Nicholas Coster-Waldau, or Jaime Lannister from Game of Thrones, who played Horus, the Egyptian god of air, where he's very clearly not Egyptian. Back in 1922 saw the film The Loves of Pharaoh, where the first Oscar was ever won by Emil Jannings for his portrayal of Egyptian pharaoh King Amenes. And you had actors in blackface like Paul Wegener who played Samlak in the same film. It's very obvious that Hollywood at its core is extremely racist and oftentimes stupid with how they treat people of color. There's no denying that. And it's not like we can go and ask people like Emil Jannings or Paul Wegener what they thought about playing those roles anyway. Otherwise it'd be like, oh right, you guys are dead as hell. But what we're seeing today is the reverse, with predominantly white historical figures being played by black actors. Regardless of what you think about diversity, this is simply racist, no matter how you see it. Another case of modern colorism by Netflix is Queen Charlotte, A Bridgerton Story, which depicts the Queen of the United Kingdom as a black woman. There's many claims on this particular historical figure, however, since there's scholars who believed Charlotte had African ancestry, but it's largely been denounced by most historians. Regardless, Queen Charlotte is depicted in paintings and writings to be the daughter of two white royals. Yet even though there's a small possibility she's black, like we're talking 1/16 black or something, that's all the ammunition Netflix needed to race swap the historical figure and use it as a shield for depicting the character as such. Another example of Hollywood doing their usual colorism is the show Vikings Valhalla, where Jarl Håkon is played by a black woman, and as you'd imagine, this also caused a storm of controversy when it happened. This led to many asking if black Vikings even existed and if this Håkon was a real chieftain during the time period. The short answer is no, and that this Jarl Håkon character was created for that show with various other real-life historical figures being used as influences to create this fictional one. While that's all well and good, it annoyed people because shows like Vikings Valhalla are meant to depict history as it was, instead of what their creators want it to be. While there's no doubt that Vikings had enslaved or employed black people in the past, the likelihood of a black ruler being accepted by legions of white-skinned, blue-eyed Vikings is just not true. But these changes are chosen by their creators to infuse diversity, yet it's only ever in one way, it seems. In The Woman King, which is a film that twists the truth of its source material in order to make the slave nation of Dahomey seem like it's a place full of heroic warrior women, when the actual history suggests that the Dahomey were a nation built upon the slavery trades of tribes they subjugated. They also participated in human sacrifices as well, with the high-ranking men of Dahomey being allowed to have multiple wives. And when these high-ranking men died, their wives, who ranged from barely teenagers to adults, would be forced to drink poison to follow their controlling husbands into the afterlife. Yet the writers and producers portrayed that nation as heroic and had the Agage female warriors win against their French invaders. Even though in reality, the French decimated Dahomey and using their control of gunpowder were able to defeat the Dahomey with little issue and dismantled the nation and ended the slave empire for good. But that's not how Hollywood depicted it, but at the very least they made the main character's ethnicity correct in their portrayal, I guess. The point I'm trying to make here is that Hollywood is very obviously trying to spin a narrative with these projects and erase the actual historical truths behind them for the sake of identity politics and woke points. Even recently you had god-awful stinkers of a movie like Black Adam, where The Rock plays an Egyptian slave who becomes a magical god, yet The Rock is Samoan and doesn't have an iota of Egyptian heritage. But he looks tanned, I guess, so people were largely okay with it and not many people batted an eye. It didn't help the movie from being ass cheeks, but the more you know. But I guess it's okay since The Rock also played the Scorpion King in the absolute classic The Mummy Returns, which is a banger of a film. And you should definitely watch it if you haven't, because it's amazing. Also, Brendan Fraser's in it, and I love him.
Where's the juice? No, where's the juice?
You even had tone-deaf castings like Justin Chatwin playing Son Goku in Dragon Ball Evolution. And while Goku is, well, an anime character and he's also an alien with a monkey tail, people thought Goku being white was racist. And largely, I would say it's accepted that if Goku were to be played in live action, it would have to be a Japanese actor. Since Akira Toriyama, the creator of Dragon Ball, is Japanese, and while the franchise has its identity heavily tied to Japanese culture for obvious reasons. And like The Rock playing Black Adam, we also had Jessica Alba playing Sue Storm in the Fantastic Four, who's a Hawaiian woman who dyed her hair blonde and wore blue eye contacts. Even though Sue is not a tan-skinned Hawaiian woman, she's white, but not many people cared. Of course, there will be examples of colorism or slight racism like Alba or The Rock that will just simply slide through the cracks because they at least look somewhat appropriate enough, I guess. But having characters like Anne Boleyn or Queen Charlotte being black is like having a Martin Luther King Netflix series with Bill Skarsgård playing the leading role. Why is it offensive to have that happen, but it's totally fine the other way around? Make it make sense. The only logical response to this is that people of color simply would be locked out of many roles if they are not allowed to play characters based on their skin or race. But the reality is that there are many people of color out there who have stories that could be told and given the same treatment, but they simply aren't for some reason. I would love to see a film about the football legend Pele being brought to life in the same vein as the Freddie Mercury biopic. I think that'd be awesome. Then again, this is the same Hollywood that back in '94, Julia Roberts was the top choice to play Harriet Tubman in a biopic, to which Julia Roberts refused for obvious reasons. Okay, now let's get to the huge elephant in the room, which is Cleopatra and the new Netflix series that is pissing off everyone in many corners. In this new series, which Netflix is going as far as to call a documentary of all things, Cleopatra will be played by a black actor, which is all kinds of racist. First of all, a documentary is defined as a form of media that's created using official records and sources. So essentially what Netflix is saying by making Cleopatra black and pushing this narrative is that everyone who's ever taken history is wrong and we're all idiots apparently. The thing is that Cleopatra was Macedonian Greek, meaning she was tan white at her darkest and was nowhere near being black herself. Cleopatra's native language was Greek as well, but she knew many other languages from Arabic to Hebrew and a few others. She was also fluent in Egyptian, which made Cleopatra an anomaly as she was able to communicate with virtually anyone she spoke to. She was also the last ruler of the Ptolemaic dynasty, which ruled from 305 to 30 BC. Cleopatra's ethnicity has largely been confirmed by scholars to be Macedonian Greek, which is an ancient tribe of Greeks that lived in the northeastern part of mainland Greece. You likely know the Macedonians thanks to the legendary Alexander the Great, who himself was also descended from this group as well. Also, Cleopatra ruled Egypt as a part of Alexander's empire, so there's a little history for you. Anyway, pushing the concept that Cleopatra was black is about as racist as Danny DeVito playing Rosa Parks. It's so obviously a colorist change that to deny or say anything otherwise is pure insanity. The reason why this particular case is pissing people off so much is because Netflix is pushing this series as fact, and there's even a viral clip where a lady says this.
I remember my grandmother saying to me, I don't care what they tell you in school, Cleopatra was black.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Hate to break it to that lady's grandma, but she was wrong as hell and likely pretty racist for trying to culturally appropriate an entire dynasty. Things have gotten so heated that there was even a petition on change.org to cancel Netflix's Cleopatra series for its racist revisioning. And I said was because this petition, which gained over 60,000 signatures in only 2 days, was removed by change.org. So you know things are one-sided when even the website that's meant to spread awareness is willing to bend the knee to woke activists like this too. The fact is, no matter what Netflix says, people like Cleopatra, Anne Boleyn, or Queen Charlotte were never black. This is all woke revisionist fanfiction being done by activists who are trying to revise history one story at a time until it becomes normalized. It's the epitome of giving an inch and they'll take a mile. The more people allow places like Netflix to push this nonsense, the more it'll keep happening. Eventually we'll have woke Netflix series that'll change Nikola Tesla into being a black man. And I wouldn't be surprised if Alexander the Great gets race swapped as well in this documentary. Because apparently being ethnically white is the most racist thing you can be today. And this reverse colorism movement will not stop until people stand and say enough and actually mean it. These woke activists can and will never be satisfied with anything until everything bends to fit their conformed view of thinking. From the destruction of blockbuster franchises or video games and even blatant racist changes like this, it's clear that the woke brain virus will not stop. The very fact that this show even got past its pre-production stage is insane. And even more so when you realize that Netflix's CEO is Ted Sarandos, who is Greek themselves. Meaning an ethnically Greek individual likely saw this woke revision of their own culture and bent the knee and then allowed it to be funded. Which is completely absurd to me, but begs the question, what can people do to combat this? The simplest answer is to cancel your subscriptions and revoke your viewership. Take it from someone who makes their living on YouTube. You must always respect your audience and their intelligence. And never assume that you are the smartest or the most morally right in the room. Because without my audience, my channel means nothing. And the same can be said about Netflix too. They have proven time and again that they are uninterested in showcasing history as it was, but instead wish to make it into what they want it to be. Black ancestry could be celebrated in original works, but the reality is that these monolithic corporations, for some reason, only see value in white stories. And instead of telling new tales about prolific black figures, they'd rather appropriate something else due to the name, and are solely only interested in one thing only, which is the money that comes from it. Cleopatra is as much black as I am an Asian woman. It just simply isn't true. And the blatant disregard and revisionist stance to historical accuracy is why fighting back against the woke mind virus is as important now than ever before. And what's even more insulting is that this Cleopatra series is being executively produced by Jada Pinkett Smith. And the documentary is a part of Netflix's African Queen series, which was made to highlight the feats of powerful African women, which Cleopatra most certainly was not and never will be, no matter how hard they try. Jada Pinkett Smith went on to say, and good God, and I quote, "We don't often get to see or hear stories about black queens, and that was really important for me as well as for my daughter, and just for my community to be able to know those stories because there are tons of them. Cleopatra is a queen who many know about, but not in her truth. She's been displayed as overtly sexual, excessive, and corrupt, yet she was a strategist and intellect, a commanding force of nature who fought to protect her kingdom, and her heritage is highly debated. This season will dive deeper into her history and reassess this fascinating part of her story." End quote. It's that one part of Jada's moronic response that really annoys me, which is where she says this is her truth. That term is used by woke activists to shield themselves from criticism, as it's designed to muddy the waters of fact and fiction, with it instead replacing actual scientific facts with nebulous mumbo-jumbo like personal feelings suddenly having more weight or validity. Basically, this is Jada and her woke dumbass friends trying to twist Cleopatra into a Afrocentric Yas queen and appropriate something they had no hand in. Honestly, if I had to say what this woke virus is like, it's sort of like the virus in Resident Evil. Every game, the heroes thwart the evil, but the bad guys get away only to mutate a new region of the world later. It's almost as if no matter what we do, this nonsense will continue for eternity. But the evil of the world will continue as long as the good people do nothing. And I thank you for watching, and let me know what you think as always. Cleopatra is not black, and neither was Anne Boleyn or any of these other historical figures. And in the words of Tolkien, which ring true evermore with every passing day, evil cannot create anything new. They can only corrupt and ruin good forces have invented or made. Keep fighting, keep resisting, and always ask questions and dig deeper. I thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.